The farmhouse looked harmless during the day, old, quiet, sunlit. But the moment I stepped inside, something felt wrong. The air was colder than outside, and the shadows in the corners seemed thicker than they should be. The first thing I noticed was the living room lamp. When I turned it on, the light flickered weakly, as if the house didn't want it there. The shadows on the walls stretched unnaturally long, bending in strange angles. I moved closer to the window, and that's when I saw it. My shadow didn't match me. I lifted my arm, my shadow lifted both. I froze. The shadow froze too. But a second too late. That night, as I lay in bed, I heard something whisper my name from the corner of the room. I turned on the lamp, but the bulb exploded instantly, plunging the room into darkness. The whisper came again, closer, and the shadow in the corner moved. I woke up at 3:11 a.m. to the sound of footsteps in the hallway. Slow, heavy, dragging. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight. The hallway was empty, but the shadow on the wall wasn't. It was tall, taller than me, and stretched across the entire length of the corridor. It didn't match anything in the house. No object, no furniture. No person. I stepped closer. The shadow bent as if acknowledging me. I whispered, "What do you want?" The shadow straightened. Then it pointed toward the basement door. A cold wave washed over me. I didn't go downstairs, not that night. But the shadow stayed there until sunrise, waiting. Every night at exactly 3:11 a.m., the whisper returned. It slid under my bedroom door like smoke. At first, it sounded like a stranger. Then, night after night, the voice changed. It became familiar, too familiar. It became my voice. "Let me in," it whispered. "I know your name. I know your shape. I know your breath." I pressed my back against the door, holding it shut even though nothing was pushing it. But the whisper grew louder, and the shadow under the door grew darker. One night, the whisper said something new. "We're almost ready." During the day, I tried to pretend everything was normal. I cooked, I cleaned. I walked around the property. But the shadows followed me everywhere. My own shadow began to lag behind me by a few seconds. When I turned, it turned late. When I stopped, it kept walking. Then one afternoon, it didn't follow me at all. I saw it in the reflection of the kitchen window, my shadow walking into the hallway while I stood still. I ran after it, but when I reached the hallway, it was gone. That night, I heard footsteps in the attic. My footsteps. But I was downstairs. I found a locked door behind a bookshelf. The key was hidden under a loose floorboard. When I opened the door, a wave of cold air hit me. The room had no windows, no lamps, no electricity, but it was full of shadows. They clung to the walls like thick, living tar. When I stepped inside, they peeled off the walls and reached toward me like hands. One of them spoke clearly for the first time. "We're almost ready." I stumbled backward, slamming the door shut. But the whisper followed me down the hallway. "You brought us here." The power went out at exactly midnight. The house fell into complete darkness. I lit a candle, but the flame bent sideways as if something was breathing on it. Then the shadows rose from the floor, all of them. They stood around me, tall and silent, copying my posture, my breathing, my heartbeat. The candle flickered violently. One shadow stepped forward. It touched my chest, and I felt my heart skip a beat. "We know enough," it whispered. One shadow separated from the others. It stretched, twisted, and reshaped itself until it had my exact outline. My height, my posture. My movements, then it lifted its head. It had my face, it smiled with my mouth. It spoke with my voice. "You don't need your body anymore," it said. "I can use it better." I backed away, but the other shadows blocked the exit. My shadow, my double, stepped into the candlelight and became solid, I reached out to touch it. My hand passed through, but its hand didn't. It grabbed my wrist and pulled. The shadows dragged me into the dark room. The one with no windows, no light, no escape. They wrapped around me like cold smoke, pulling me into the walls, into the floor, into the darkness itself. My double walked out of the room wearing my body, breathing my air, living my life. I screamed, but no sound came out. I was part of the shadows now. A whisper, a shape, a memory dot, and as my double left the house, I felt the shadows around me whisper. Now we wait for the next one. If you want the full narrated version of this story, more episodes, or a new horror series, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. The shadows are always listening. Darkness has no shape, but somehow I knew the shadows around me were watching, studying, whispering. I couldn't see them, but I felt them, brushing against my skin like cold fingertips, circling me like vultures waiting for something to die. I wasn't sure how long I had been trapped in that room. Time didn't exist there. There was no light, no sound except the whispers, and no sense of direction. Only the feeling that the walls were breathing, and that I was breathing with them. Then something changed. A faint glow appeared in the distance. A thin line of light, like a crack in the darkness. The shadows recoiled from it, hissing softly. I moved toward it, drawn by instinct, by desperation, by the hope that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't completely erased. As I approached, the crack widened, and I saw something impossible. The farmhouse, my farmhouse. But not as it was. It looked older, rotting, abandoned for decades. The windows were shattered, the roof sagging, the walls covered in vines. It was the same house, but not in the same time. I stepped through the crack. The air hit me like a punch, cold, wet, heavy with the smell of mold and earth. I stood in the living room, but everything was wrong. The furniture was gone, the wallpaper peeled in long strips. The floorboards creaked under my weight, and the shadows were everywhere. They clung to the walls like stains. They pooled in the corners like spilled ink. They shifted when I looked away. I whispered, "What is this place?" A voice answered behind me. "The house remembers everyone it takes." I turned. An old man stood in the doorway. His eyes were hollow, his skin pale, his clothes decades out of date. But the worst part was his shadow. It wasn't attached to him. It stood beside him, taller, darker, watching me with a hunger I could feel in my bones. "Who are you?" I asked. He smiled sadly. Someone who tried to escape. His shadow leaned closer to him, whispering something I couldn't hear. The man flinched. "They learn you," he said, "piece by piece, breath by breath, until they can replace you." I swallowed hard. "Is there a way out?" He shook his head. "There's only a way deeper." The floorboards behind him cracked. Something crawled out of the darkness, long, thin, stretching like a shadow peeling itself off the floor. The man whispered, "They're hungry tonight." He backed away. His shadow didn't. It lunged at me. I ran. Through the hallway. Up the stairs. Into the attic. The door slammed shut behind me. I turned and froze. The attic was filled with drawings, hundreds of them, covering every wall. Drawings of people, faces, bodies, shadows, and in the center of the room, a drawing of me. My face, my eyes, my shadow. Underneath it, written in shaky handwriting, "They know your name." The floor creaked behind me. I turned slowly. A shadow stood in the corner, my shadow. But not the one that replaced me. The one that had followed me for years. It stepped forward, and whispered, We're not done learning. My shadow stepped into the faint moonlight leaking through the cracked attic window. It was taller than me now, its edges sharper, its movements smoother. Almost graceful. It tilted its head, studying me like a scientist examining a specimen. "You don't belong here," it whispered. My voice, but colder, hollow. I backed away until my shoulders hit the wall. "You took everything from me." It shook its head slowly. "No, I took what you wasted." It stepped closer. "You lived your life in fear, in regret, not in silence. You never used your voice. You never used your strength. You never used your name." It leaned in. "So we learned it for you." I clenched my fists. "What do you want from me?" It smiled, a thin, unnatural curve. "A soul," my breath caught. "Shadows don't have souls." "Not yet." It reached out, its hand stretching like smoke. "But we're learning." I tried to run, but the attic door slammed shut. The shadows on the walls peeled off and crawled toward me like insects. They wrapped around my legs, my arms, my throat. My shadow stepped closer. "You opened the door when you moved here. You let us in. You let us watch. You let us learn." I gasped for air. "I didn't know." "You did," it whispered. "Every time you felt alone. Every time you felt unseen. Every time you wished you were someone else. You called to us." The shadows tightened around me. My shadow placed its hand on my chest. Cold dot burning, empty. "We want what you never used," it said. "Your soul, your purpose, your life." I screamed, but the sound died in my throat. The shadows began pulling me downward, into the floor, into the darkness, into the place where the house kept its memories. But then, a voice echoed through the attic, a voice I recognized, my own, but not from the shadow. From the crack in the wall, the crack of light. The same one that brought me here. The voice whispered, "Get up." I froze. The shadow froze too. The crack widened. Light spilled into the attic, burning the shadows like fire. They recoiled, hissing, melting into the floorboards. My shadow screamed, a sound that shook the entire house. I crawled toward the light. My shadow grabbed my ankle. "You can't leave," it shrieked. "You belong to us." I kicked free and threw myself into the crack. Light swallowed me. Heat, air, sound. I fell onto the floor of my real farmhouse, the one in my world, gasping for breath. The shadows were gone. The house was silent. But the mirror in the hallway, it wasn't broken anymore. It was whole, perfect, waiting. And in the reflection, my shadow smiled. Not the one that replaced me, the one that followed me, the one that learned me. It whispered, "We're not finished."